All right, so we're finally live. All right, this is the first one, so hopefully everything will not blow up. So we have a very special guest tonight on our live stream, a good friend of mine, Jon Stroll. Some of you, I'm sure, are here from the Raccoons community, and but we're also going to talk about his Motown background and Robocop the series and all the crazy stories. It's a little weird for me to do this because Jon and I have worked together for a long, long time, and we're really looking forward to doing this. The other thing, Jim Gilson, if you're watching this, and I imagine you are, I'm going to give you a call this week, and we need to find a way to make this a three-way, but not in the way that it sounds like by saying it's a three-way, but so we can do this because it'd be really fun for us to get all the way in here. So, because I am not a professional host, although I am occasionally paid to be one, without further ado, we are going to bring Jon Stroll on the chat here.
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going terrific.
There we go. There we go. How's it going?
All right. Yep. Greetings from sunny and very windy Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, the weather here sucks. It was nice yesterday. But right now, the weather sucks. It's not snowy or rainy or anything. It's
well, I don't mean to make you feel bad, but
yeah, you do.
Fahrenheit tomorrow, it's going to be 75 here.
Yeah, screw you.
What can I say?
Oh, man, yeah. Well, yeah, it was really, really nice yesterday. It wasn't super warm, but it was nice, and now it's just
it's crisp,
just gray. And so far, but there is one thing I am thankful for: nothing has actually blown up yet. Now that I've said that, probably the whole house will wind up being on fire and all of that kind of jazz. I haven't talked to Kevin in a couple of days, though. Have you talked to Kevin?
Actually,
lately?
Kevin and I were emailing each other this morning. Kevin needed some information. We're going to be releasing several of the albums on Spotify, and G Chung, has been involved with Kevin and the music and me for decades,
very well, yeah,
is involved in it. And there were a couple of follow-up pieces of information. One of them was a song that Kevin and I produced with Rupert Holmes. Another is a song that Kevin and I produced with Rita Coolidge, and an instrumental just to go through if there are any featured musicians, and then that album will be good to go. And
Lake Freeze?
We've been, it's all remastered and ready to go. Sounds great.
Yeah. I was lucky I got to help get some of the stuff
You
mastered.
were involved in the beginnings of it. You were involved in the transfers.
Oh, going through all those DAT tapes.
And we went through some nightmares with the transfers. But anyway,
I remember.
Kevin got...
It was worth it, though. It sounds great.
Yeah.
Now we're teasing everybody because they can't hear it yet, but they will when it gets released. I wasn't sure if we could say anything about it yet.
Well, it's coming. It's not there yet, but it's coming.
So I didn't realize that that we were possibly going to be able to release the Rita Coolidge stuff too. That's a recent development. When did that go down?
The Rita Coolidge stuff was released on the Raccoons song track. So we always had the legal ability to use the songs and the records that we did with Rita Coolidge and Leo Sayer, John Schneider, Rupert Holmes, Dottie West. We had all the legal work was done to be able to release those. They were used obviously on the Raccoons TV series, but they've also been released on record. And some of them really, considering that they were mainly done in the 80s, they sound great.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember just going through the masters is just how good they sounded. There wasn't really a whole lot of deterioration or anything.
We had an exceptional engineer in Canada, a guy named
Johnny the C.
John Sabansky, otherwise known as Johnny the C, who was outstanding. It was not a great studio, and the musicians weren't always the best, but he worked his magic, and we worked beautifully together for many years, and he was a very talented guy. And I got to tell you, we've worked with more famous, more well-known engineers in Toronto and in New York and in Montreal. But I think John Sabansky was probably, in my opinion, the best of them all.
Well, you recorded a bunch of that stuff at Mark Sound, didn't you? The old Mark Sound studios at the Saint Laurent?
Yep, exactly. And we did other projects there.
That's a hard place to do stuff in.
We did a project before the Raccoons. Kevin and I did Yes You Can there.
For CBC.
Yep, with CBC. And amazingly, because this would never happen now, with a big orchestra.
Yeah, Kevin's good at that. Like, how did he get an orchestra for the show for CBC?
Clue. I have no clue, but
I got to ask him how the hell he did that.
Well, I mean, I was able to do stuff when I was at the peak of my career, when I was writing jingles in New York, and I had major campaigns, Burger King, JCPenney, Lipton, and all sorts of HFC, and all sorts of major campaigns, California Summer Fruits and everything else. I would go in a studio. I would go in a studio with musicians, and a jingle, it's a 30-second or a 60-second or a couple of 30s or a couple of 60s or whatever. Yep. And I had the finest New York studio musicians. So we would get the basic track done so quickly that I would like throw a chart with a song demo for them to play. And we would cut a demo of a song on the same session. And because they worked with me a lot, they were game to do it. I mean, nobody does that now.
No, you don't get to do that anymore. I wish. I mean, sometimes I'm lucky and we get to do session musician stuff for Go Nitro for Fox, but typically that's just not done anymore.
I've been very good over the years at getting people to work with me and, you know, treat me special and, you know, get things that most people don't get. And that's partially because I'm very good at what I do, and also partially because I've got a very outgoing and supportive personality with a grain of a sense of humor most of the time. So it's worked in my favor over the years. No tire irons. I AAA for that. Yeah, I can.
There we go.
All right.
So in the miracle of unprofessionalism, yeah, for the live stream, I've got everything connected to the Tascam. The Tascam is connected to mains, but when it runs for a certain amount of time, it will shut off unless it's recording, which I'm actually going to do right now.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just going to tell it to, yeah, no, it's really not. It's the first punt. Got a new mixer coming in, so it'll. So by the time we get to the third, I was hoping it was not going to do that today, but I'm going to scooch over here. But it is still a little bit of a dry run, so all you can do is laugh from my CJOH days. So one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about is a lot of people know you from that are watching would know you from the Raccoons stuff and the Robocop, the series stuff. But what a lot of people probably don't know is your hit music career going back to the Motown days.
Right.
How did you start? Because you started right out of high school.
Yeah, I got into the music business. I was singing with my high school girlfriend. I was 18, she was 16. And there was a bar and disco on Long Island in New York State, near New York City. And we had written a song called Down by the Sea, and we got up and played it. And there were some pretty heavyweight record business people there, and we blew them away. And that led to me writing My first record that I ever commercially released record that I ever played on, I was a senior in high school. And Amy, when we wrote that song, I was 18, she was 16. And that song got recorded too by the people that produced Walk Away Renee. So anyway, I wound up writing a song called Beat the Clock for the McCoys. It was on the charts when I was a senior in high school, and then it became a #1 record in Finland and Sweden. And it's actually been #1 in Finland twice, again around the millennium at 99, 2000. And that was followed by
was that Hetki Leo? What became Hetki Leo, or is that a different
Hetki
song?
Leo, yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering.
And that, I mean, I still make very nice money from that even now. And that's a lot of years ago. I'm not going to, you know, divulge the number, but more than I'm happy about. So anyway, that led to a major writing relationship with Bobby Weinstein. Bobby had written the lyrics for a lot of the Teddy Randazzo songs. There were hits for Little Anthony, Going Out of My Head, Hurt So Bad, I'm on the Outside Looking In, which was my favorite of the songs. And he and I wrote Sweet Cream Ladies for the Box Tops, which was a pretty big hit in the US. And we were artists, and we were signed to Capitol Records, and we were living in Memphis, Tennessee, recording with Chips Moman at American Recording. And Chips produced Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, Son of a Preacher Man by Dusty Springfield, a lot of major records. Just Can't Help Believing by B.J. Thomas, which I actually played on. And then that led to two interesting developments for me. One was because I kind of grew up, my education was the studio musicians in Memphis who played on hundreds of hit records. I learned how to play on a record with them. And when I got back to New York, I was able to turn that into a very good career as one of the top keyboard players in New York. And I played on hit records, Barry Manilow records, Tony Orlando records, B.J. Thomas records, and a lot of very famous people. We were booked by a booking service, and sometimes they would say something like, Charlie Colello, who was an arranger, wants you at CBS recording 2 to 5 with a possible hour. And I would show up and walk into the studio, and there was Johnny Cash. So it was an interesting time. And then that also led, because of my reputation as a songwriter, it led to writing jingles. But that was also around the time that I met Kevin Gillis. I had originally met Steve Tyrell, who was B.J. Thomas's manager at the time. He's a successful record producer, and he's a successful jazz singer now. And because I had worked with him down in Memphis, I approached him and wound up working for B.J. Thomas, who I went on tour with him. I wrote a song with him. It was a great relationship. I played on a couple of his hit records, and that was around the time that Kevin Gillis and I met. Kevin was signed. Steve Tyrell had a record deal with Columbia Records called New Design Records, and Kevin Gillis at the time was a folk singer from the Ottawa Valley, and we became instant friends, and that's many, many years ago, and one of my closest friends.
How did you wind up in the Ottawa Valley? Because around the late 70s, that'd be probably around all of our old stomping grounds at CJOH. He was
in Chesterville.
Yeah.
He was living in a convent, and that's when we first started working together. I came up, and he was just beginning to get into the television business. In the beginning, not as a producer, he was involved with Bruno Gerussi and Celebrity Cooks.
The one and only Bruno Gerussi.
And Bruno was a really nice guy.
Bruno's awesome.
So
I never got to meet him. I wish I did.
He was really a sweetheart. So Kevin talked the producers into using me on some episodes of Celebrity Cooks. So I flew up there and That was pre-Bang Bang You're Alive.
That was at Studio A. It was at my old studio at CJOH in Studio A.
Absolutely, yes. I was like the Paul Schaefer on the Letterman show on that show, and that was the beginning of a very long association with the legendary TV producer Jorn Winter. And at the same time, when I was in New York, I was working with the top studio musicians who played on tons of hit records. And one of them was a person who was a friend of mine for 40 years until he passed in 2012, named Bob Babbitt, who was one of the Funk Brothers from the Motown. And that's
legendary
how I got
Bob
to
Babbitt.
know all of them.
Is that how you ended up? Is that how you ended up meeting Paul Justman, or were you guys friends already?
No, I met Bob Babbitt introduced me to Paul Justman, and Paul and I immediately hit it off. And we were developing some projects which didn't work out. I mean, you and I were developing
Japanese
cooking series, which we did a pilot. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember that for the Food Network.
To sell it, but it was a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. I remember us all being delirious at like 5:30 in the morning trying to get the thing going on.
Yeah, it was a restaurant in Toronto that I had been dealing with for years, and I struck the deal with them. We got everything worked out with them, all the insurance riders and everything else, but they had to be open until they were done and cleaned up. So we got in to start setting up the shoot at about 11 o'clock at night, and wound up shooting all night. And
and they were telling us to get the hell out. They were nice about it. They weren't jerks about it. They were like, yeah, we got to get ready.
We're still doing, shooting a take, and security's coming in to kick us out.
Yeah, I remember that. We were so delirious. How many of
completely
not a huge. What was it, about 7 or 8 of us? So it was you, me, Steph.
Tats.
I know Tats.
Sabu.
And
Sabu was the host of the show. Mitsuhiro Sabu, friend of mine from Chiba, Japan, who was a sushi chef in California. And Sabu came up with the concept of Sushi Clash, and we did both. He had a radio show called Sushi Clash at KCSB,
I remember that.
UC Santa Barbara radio station, 2 hours every Sunday night. KCSB became a Japanese radio station. He was playing a lot of my music on it and a lot of other people's, friends and whatever. And it was great. And then, and he was a very good looking guy, and he spoke reasonably good English. So we developed Sushi Clash as a TV project.
Yeah, I remember that. I think I still have the master tapes somewhere.
Yeah.
I think we ended up banging it. We probably had footage enough for a couple of episodes anyway.
We had quite a bit of stuff. I would have packaged it just with Sabu, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, you live and you learn, right?
Yeah,
that's all you can do. The thing with the cucumber was funny. When we went to, where did we shoot? Was that in the Kensington market that we shot that? Or I'm trying to remember where the hell we shot that.
Yes, I remember that.
And we didn't get any permits or anything. We just basically.
Oh no, you just brought the camera and started shooting.
Yeah, and people were looking around like, what the? Yeah, I think.
But I mean, in Toronto, that's standard operating procedure. People are.
Yeah, nobody cares
anyway.
Nobody cares. They just. They go, it's Toronto, it's film. It's just
so anyway, Kevin started out doing Celebrity Cooks, and then we did Yes You Can. And then I remember the first time Kevin was at my apartment on Riverside Drive in New York City, overlooking the Hudson River. A very tiny but gorgeous apartment. I had 2 pianos there. I had a Kanabe 8.5 foot grand piano there.
Oh, wow.
And the view from the window, you wouldn't have believed. And then I also had an upright piano. So we had 2 pianos tuned to each other and everything else. And I remember the first time the phone rang, and it was Sheldon Wiseman calling Kevin. And I had never heard of Sheldon Wiseman before. Well, it turned out that Kevin and Sheldon created the Raccoons. Mm-hmm. Kevin was basically the creator of it. Sheldon took care of a lot of the legal and business aspects of it, and started out We started out by doing several specials. CBC was extremely enthusiastic about the project. They would send a gazillion people to Ottawa. I remember we would have the meetings and the shoots, and then we would all go to La Roma for amazing Italian food. And
I know La Roma.
Yeah, and we would eat there. We would be there for hours.
My dad took me there when I was a kid.
That was the beginning of the Raccoons franchise.
And that ran a while too. It went to series in '85, right? Because I think there were 4 specials.
We were in production for the series in '84, and it hit the air either fall '84 or winter '85, I think, but I can't remember for sure. And what happened was we did several specials: the Christmas Raccoons, Raccoons on Ice. We did an album, Raccoons Let's Dance, which was a video and an album. And then we did a 2-hour called The Raccoons and the Lost Star. And that basically served as kind of the pilot for what developed into the series. And we did a total of 65 half-hour episodes.
And you had a lot of music in the series too.
Very heavy into the music. We wrote, primarily me, Kevin, and Stephen Lunt wrote most of the songs that were used in the series. And Kevin made arrangements, and we signed deals with a lot of major singers: Rita Coolidge, Leo Sayer, Rupert Holmes, Dottie West, John Schneider, and some people that you might not have heard of who were amazing: Luba, Curtis King Jr. We had a lot of amazing singers, and the background vocals, I was always in on the background vocals on it. I also played all the keyboards, did all the arranging, and Kevin and I produced the music together, the two of us, and we really did some amazing work. And it was very heavy music. I mean, there was lots of score also, and we worked generally pretty big orchestrally.
Yeah, and you probably had at least 60% of the show had underscore running through it. Whereas usually when I worked in animation, for the most part, I mean, you know this better than anybody, usually you don't have the luxury of having quite that many cues. Whereas nice that the Raccoons had underscore running through the entire thing for the most part.
There was a lot of music. And, you know, scored to picture. I mean, eventually we did some editing as we got later into the series, and we had more cues in our library. But in the beginning, and all the specials and the beginning episodes of the series, primarily they were all scored to picture. We had a cue that we used to use as the closing of the episode before the end credits.
That piano cue?
Yeah, that, that we...
And then you have horns that go up on top of it.
Yeah, and then it cut to, well, the original version of Run With Us by Stephen Lunt, which I love, and the remaster, which I haven't sent you, but it sounds amazing. And that was for season 1.
I can't remember if Kevin sent it to me or not. We were talking about it when we were going through the master stuff for the album.
Yeah, probably have to send it to you by Dropbox, because the file
I'll ask
is too
him.
large to email.
Yeah, it would have been pretty big, because it would have been an uncompressed.
The file
would be a couple of hundred.
30 or 40 megabit file.
Yeah, it sounds about right. If it's uncompressed, a stereo.
Right.
Ready to.
But the mastering is great, and you know, eventually we did another version of it that had a lot of amazing rock guitar by the brilliant Neil Chapman, who was an absolutely incredible lead guitarist.
Yeah, he was really shredding those cues.
Oh, he was an amazing guitarist, and he played on a lot of our stuff. And we did it with Lisa Lougheed, who sang a lot of the songs later on in the series. The version with Stephen Lunt, which was used in season 1, is simpler. It's more tasty, but it's also more techno. It's less.
Yeah, and it's a little cleaner.
It's
not that the other one's dirtier,
it's very much cleaner. Kevin and I kind of had our moments where we kind of produced things pretty seriously. You know, for the most part, it was all appropriate with the music, but, you know, we did some pretty big productions.
And I mean, that sort of thing, you just don't see that. Even CBC wasn't doing a whole lot of that at the time.
No.
How did you get away with being able to do that much?
Kevin really got CBC very excited about the Raccoons, and for good reason, because it became an institution, and like people that watched it when they were kids, and then they became adults and they had kids and the kids watched it, and it was an institution.
I ended up working at the same animation studio, probably largely due to watching it as a kid. When I was a kid, I didn't even know it was in Ottawa, and then I didn't find that out until later when I ended up doing my internship and later on going to Sheridan.
Yeah, well, Ottawa seemed at the time to have a lot of animation production going on.
Yeah, not as much now as there used to be, but
well,
there's still a few.
That's true in Toronto too, for that matter.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Nelvana's still working away. In Ottawa, did you know Corey Morrison at all? Because he was one of the animation supervisors.
What was the name of the major animation company in Montreal?
Cinar?
Yeah.
Because there were two, but Cinar was the big one.
I remember Leslie Harris, who was our production manager on Raccoons, eventually went to Montreal and worked for Cinar.
Yeah, and then because they had a number of large franchises. Because they had, at the time, they had Arthur, and they had Caillou and a number of other shows. They had a bunch of other shows.
What's interesting, Corey, about Raccoons, as compared to how the classic, first of all, now a lot of the animation is the computer animation rather than the hand-drawn and hand-painted animation.
Yeah.
But when it is that, a lot of that work is farmed out to Asia, to places like the Philippines. Well, when we did Raccoons, we had Hinton Animation, which was a big facility on the west end of Ottawa.
About 400 artists at the time.
And we did all the artwork was done in-house. All the drawing, all the coloring, all the camera was all done in-house.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Even when now pretty much everything is sourced out. When I was there, well, it went through, Sheldon was my boss then, and it went through, as you know, a couple of different names, it was like Crawley's, Atkinson Film Arts.
And then there was Hinton, and there was Lacewood, then there was Amberwood.
It's all the same studio, but different legal name, and then Sheldon would kind of close them and start them back up. And now it's mainly distribution, because all the animation now, but when I was there, when I was working on House Hounds and Zero Man and Benjamin Bear, and I forget what else I was working on, we were doing posing there, we were doing our key animation there, so frame 1, 5, 10, 15, blah, 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 and then the in-betweens were being sent to Asia. So there was some animation being done, but not the in-betweens.
Well, you know, what happens
about halfway through, it was all no keys at all.
When you start farming out the work across the world, weird stuff happens. Like, I remember I was working...
2 characters talking on 1 voice track.
Oh, like, what I remember was...
that happened to me.
When I was working on Eckhart in Prince Edward Island, and they farmed out the animation, and then it would come back, and 1 character would be talking, and 3 characters' mouths would be moving.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff happened to us all the time.
Or the wrong character's mouth would be moving.
Yep.
Based on the dialogue. So it was pretty funny. Well, we did that all in-house on Raccoons.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about that happening when you do it inside. See, the problem is even when you factor in the cost of having to send the damn thing back, it often winds up being cheaper.
And then a language issue on top.
Then you have a language barrier because everything has to be translated. The Korean animators are unbelievably good. They're very, very talented.
I'm sure they were.
But anytime I mean, Korean isn't a language that I speak, but obviously, as you know, French I speak fluently, and I was fluent in Indonesian. And there are some things, when you speak more than one language, there are some things that just don't translate. And when you start introducing complicated technical concepts and things, and then you start adding deadlines, and it's I don't want to say it's a recipe for disaster, but it provides a case where things can go wrong, and you're going to have to reduce some things.
Well, I mean, I know my problem is that when I was younger, I had much more contact with French. And then as I got a little bit older, especially when I moved out here, which was in 1989, and I've been here many times before that. And then I've also lived in Toronto, and I've lived in South Florida. Here in South Florida, it's mainly Spanish. So when I start to try and talk in French, it switches over to Spanish.
And the funny thing is both languages are extremely similar.
There are similarities, and you can get a sense of it, and Italian too. You can get a sense of it.
If I turn on Telemundo, for example, I can usually pick up about 60% of what's being said, because the gender forms, like for those that don't speak French or Spanish and just speak English and might not know this, and you know this, John, and I know this, in Spanish and French, everything has a gender form.
Right.
Regardless of whether
they're slightly different, and you know, it's not something that we deal with in English, of course.
And not man, woman, like a inanimate object is going to have a gender form.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Depending on the word, certain letters that end a word are going to be more masculine, and you would say, for example, in French, le. Another word might be different, and you might say la. That's not something that happens in English, obviously.
No. We always used to have, for example, in French, if I'm walking, you're walking, we're walking, the suffix is always going to be the same. It's going to be in. Whereas in French, it would be I'm walking, je serai, you're walking, tu seras, we're walking,
exactly. So
nous serons.
It's like there's grammar differences and stuff that, we don't have that in English, but the foreign languages. No. On the other hand, generally, those languages, the way things are spelled is the way they're pronounced, and English is not always that way.
No, and it's not literal either. And that makes things more difficult. There's less rules in English that are hard and fast rules, but if you're learning English, it makes it really difficult, because a lot of the reasons that you say things are arbitrary. Why is it that I say that? Well, it's just the way it is.
Certain languages are English is very difficult. For example, I produced a CD with a Japanese singer-songwriter for RCA Victor Japan a few years ago.
Yeah.
And Sabu, who was the host of our show Sushi Clash, was my assistant on that project.
Yep.
And it was very difficult for the Japanese people that I was working with to navigate English. And then especially when Mitsuru, that was the artist, decided he wanted to sing 3 of the songs in English, and he didn't speak English. So my friend Jackie Warner and I wrote 3 of the songs. We didn't translate. We wrote lyrics in English for the songs, and then Mitsuru had to sing phonetically. It was pretty tricky, but we pulled it off, and it was a very nice album, actually.
Yeah, it's tough because you don't really have context. When you don't have context, you can still kind of plow your way through it, but it makes it more difficult.
It's just the languages, the whole timbre of the languages are just so incredibly different.
They're completely different.
It's just as hard for us to understand the Asian language as it is for them to understand our language.
Well, the structure is different.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not dealing with, depending on the language, you know, for example, you're dealing with an individual letter, if you want to call it that, is not going to correspond to a single letter in English. It's going to correspond to a sound.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, what was interesting when we did Raccoons, because as I said, it was all very much in-house. And for the music, Kevin and I decided that we would actually write and record the entire songs, even though they may not always have been used completely in the show, so that we could release albums and everything else. And it's really a good thing that we did that. There was a little bit of resistance from Sheldon, but Kevin won out on that, you know, fortunately. We didn't I mean, if they were going to use a minute of Lake Freeze by Rita Coolidge, we didn't just record a minute of Lake Freeze. We recorded the entire song. And we worked with amazing singers, our background singers. We traveled a lot too. We did Dottie West down in Nashville with Scott Hendricks, who's a big producer and engineer in Nashville now with Capitol Records.
Yeah.
We worked in Los Angeles. We worked in New York. We worked with a lot of these people. And it was, you know, it was really interesting. We did a lot of traveling, and we worked at Wally Hyder Recording in Los Angeles and Bullet Recording in Nashville, and a lot of really great studios around the US, and a lot of great talent. I mean, and where it all came back to was a lot of the featured musicians that we used on Raccoons were actually Canadian. There was Neil Chapman, who was an outstanding rock and roll lead guitar player, and also Bob Mann, who was a studio musician originally from New York. He moved up to Toronto, lived in Toronto for a long time, eventually moved back to New York. And Bob played on a lot of our songs. He played on the original Stephen Lunt version of Run With Us. And then we, you know, I flew Bob Babbitt from the Funk Brothers, the Motown musicians. I flew Bob up to Canada to play on a lot of the songs because...
You had Bob doing guitar on some of the Raccoons tracks?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said you had Bob doing guitar on some of the Raccoons tracks?
Yeah, Bob played on a lot of the Rita Coolidge and Leo Sayer.
Oh, wow. That's very cool.
And Dottie West and all that stuff. That's Bob. And the thing about Bob, you know, he was the bass player. He was actually the number 2 bass player at Motown. But the number 1 bass player, his name was James Jamerson, was an amazingly talented, gifted bass player. But he had some vices. And he died in the mid-'80s, and Bob wound up playing on a lot of major records. Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, which the first thing you hear is Babbitt's descending bass line. That was Bob Babbitt. Mercy, Mercy Me, a lot of very major records. And he
was a legendary.
Legendary. And he came up and played on a lot of Raccoons. But then the featured musicians were largely Canadian. We had, as I said, Neil Chapman on lead guitar, Bob Mann. We had the late, great Mo Kaufman, sax player. He was our contractor for the horns, but he was also an incredible sax player. And
I used to play with the National Arts Center Orchestra.
Yeah, and he also worked with the Canadian brass and all this stuff. So I mean, he was pretty amazing. You know, great reputation. And you know,
You made him laugh.
Huh?
You managed to crack him up. On some of the cues.
cracking up some of the musicians. We had these 3 woodwind players from the National Arts Center Orchestra. The flutist was named Roland Floyd.
Yeah.
And the clarinetist was Peter Smith, and the flutist was Bob Cram. And you had the most serious of the 3, which was our oboist, you know, and then we had...
What is it about oboe players? Every oboe player I know, they're so
He was very
cool
serious.
people,
he was very serious. And then there was Bob Cram, who was kind of in the middle. And then there was Peter Smith, who was a crack up. So by the time we got done, it was a lot of fun to get Roland Floyd to crack up and lose it. You know, in between PS, they all played some beautifully wonderful parts on the score of the series.
Any stories stand out with the three of them?
Huh?
I said, are there any stories that stand out with the three of them?
It was largely not the three of them at the same time. I mean, we had a lot of fun with Peter Smith, the clarinetist. I mean, we used, Peter was on a lot of the pig stuff that we did. And Peter was a character, and he was funny, and we just had a blast.
That's funny. So I still want to loop back in with the Raccoon stuff, but I think a lot of people don't really know how far the Ottawa history goes. Tell me a little bit about Bang Bang You're Alive with Kevin. I think that's something that might be of interest.
Kevin was, this was around the time when I met Kevin. He wasn't producing TV shows. He was a singer-songwriter. And he had a manager named Peter Casperson, and Peter Casperson helped turn him on to Steve Tyrell, and he signed with Steve Tyrell, and that's when I came in the picture, because I was working with BJ Thomas. So eventually, Kevin was approached by Jorn Winter about doing the series called Bang Bang You're Alive. And it was a music variety show. We flew in all sorts of people. We had Maria Muldaur, we had the Bay City Rollers, we had Gloria Loring, who was married to Alan Thicke. We had the King family. We had Martin Mull, which was one of the funniest episodes. We had Sally Kellerman, also a very funny episode. And Kevin was the host, and he was, very likable. He would come out in his hockey sweaters, and I was the musical director, and Jorn was the producer director, had a lot of fun with me and had me doing all sorts of fun stuff like jumping on pogo sticks and having eggs cracked on my head and being the fireman. It was a blast. We had a lot of fun. It was the fun part for me was we were doing them basically on consecutive days for the most part. So we finished taping a show, and then the next act would have flown in, and late that night I would sit down and have a meeting with the act as far as what we're going to do. And it would always involve Kevin singing, them performing a song, and it would involve Kevin singing a duet with them. Kevin and Maria Muldaur singing together. Kevin and Martin Mull singing They Never Met, about two nurses, one who worked the day shift and one who worked the night. And the song is called They Never Met. And I mean, funny stuff. Very funny stuff.
Speaking of which, the perils of live casting at home. Tilk, go lie down. I love you too, but you need to go lie down. See, because we're not doing this in a studio like we do with Go Nitro, occasionally Tilk and Zero are going to, I've just resigned myself to the fact that they are just going to show up from time to time.
There's a woman who was a weather person on ABC7 in Los Angeles, and she just had a baby. And, during the height of the pandemic, a lot of people were shooting from home. So, and this is maybe 6 weeks ago when this happened. She's doing the weather. She's got all the graphics and the screen, the monitors.
Yeah, because you can do the green screen at home. It's also easy now.
Right. And all of a sudden, her baby shows up in the picture. So she has to pick up the baby while she's doing the weather.
That's funny.
It's somewhere. I mean, you can find it on YouTube. If you
There's been a lot of this during the pandemic, these kind of funny
there has.
news.
Well, that one that you and I have laughed about where they were doing
that was the Texas judge
court case.
And he has like a cat.
Call, and the lawyer was a cat. Hilarious.
That was pretty fun. And he's like, well, I believe I'm a cat. Well, and he's like, the poor guy is...
he's going, I am
not a cat. That was pretty funny.
It's very funny. I might have to, when we finish this, I might have to have a good look.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I mean,
So anyway, we did Bang Bang, and that led to the first time that I moved to Los Angeles. I had kind of connected on a personal level with a woman, Paula Levenbach, who was a producer on the show. And Paula and I went back to LA and started up there. And that was the beginning of really my acclimating myself to the scene in LA, but I was still at a place in New York. And then that's when Kevin would come down to New York. Kevin's wife, Sally, who is a classical pianist and also a composer. She and I have done many things together over the years also. Sally's from New York. Her family's from New York. So they were around a lot. So that was as Kevin and I were beginning to really start writing songs. And we wrote some terrific songs. A lot. I had mentioned to Kevin this morning, a lot of the best songs that we worked on for the show, for the Raccoons, were songs either that Kevin and I wrote, just the two of us, or that Kevin and I wrote with Stephen Lund.
Wow.
Still
yeah,
with me,
I'm still with you. Your audio dropped out for a second, but you're back now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
okay.
But we're getting there. I mean, so far nothing too major. The most thing.
And then Kevin and I also were doing music for other shows. We had a show. It was an Italian cooking series.
Pasquale.
Called Pasquale's Kitchen Express.
On
ran
Omni.
Forever. It ran forever.
Yeah, I remember that
and
show.
They produced it at CHCH in Hamilton, and they used our music. We had a wonderful theme that Kevin and I wrote.
That's an interesting stage.
We had an accordion player that was playing at the local Italian restaurant, came in, played on it. It was, if I remember right, it's Peter Smith on clarinet.
Was he? Was he doing clarinet on that theme?
Yeah, I think so, because I can't remember any other clarinet player we used. We did that at Mark Sound with Johnny the C, John Sabansky, and we had Pace Sturdivant on trumpet. It was really a good theme. We did a nice package. The show ran on the Superstation CHCH in Canada. It was on syndication.
It ran a long time. It ran a
very long time, and it was on the Discovery Channel.
Tilt, go lie down.
In the US.
Sorry, my dog is being an idiot.
And it was there for a long
Tilt,
time.
Go lie down.
So yeah, it ran on CHCH until not that long ago.
Yeah, it ran. I think it only stopped running like maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
I know exactly.
It ran a long time.
Decades, many decades. Pasquale, at one point, they developed a second cooking show with him, and that was a dud.
It didn't run very long. I don't actually remember what the name of the show was.
I don't either, but I can tell you that it came and went, and Pasquale's Kitchen Express was still there. And then we did...
How many episodes were there of that? There were a ton. Must have been like 200-300 at least. At least.
Yeah, I was going to say at least 150 or so.
I was going to say, because, I mean, how long was it in production for? At least 6-7 years, because it was a Canadian season of like 13 episodes per.
And he was funny. He was always, thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much, yes.
He was so very heavy, and he was an opera singer. So, and the set was great.
It was a big set too.
You know? Yeah, it was a beautiful set. I've been lucky enough over the years on a lot of the shows that I've worked on that had really great sets. I worked on an NBC soap opera, again, with Jorn Winter, and again, I had an on-camera part. I had a recurring acting part on the show, as well as writing their music. And that was, the sets. Jack McAdam created the sets, a very, very good set designer.
He did Passions too, didn't he? Or am I getting him?
He
okay,
did.
I was wondering.
Yeah, he did Family Passions too. Very, very good set designer and
They
producer.
punch above their weight because a lot of the time when you're dealing with soaps, it was interesting because the lighting and production design for these kinds of shows, I mean, for a soap, he went quite a bit above what that.
He knew how to do it.
I'll say.
And, you know, Jorn was involved with All My Children, and Santa Barbara, and Generations. So he did some major soaps. Now there are only 4 soaps left.
Yeah, what are they now?
But at the time, there were a lot more. It's a very expensive medium.
Is.
So, you know, to put on our show was a 30-minute show, but even a 30-minute show, you have to have writers, you have to have actors, you've got crew, you're shooting, you know, 5 episodes
and they're cranking it out. I mean, the actors don't have a lot of time to go through the material.
No, they're not a lot of multiple takes. You're not going to get one of these directors that wants to get it perfect and does 15 takes. It's
not going to happen. Well, it was mainly multicam live to tape for the most part.
Absolutely.
Did you do Generations the same way, multicam live to tape?
Yep.
How many cameras did Jorn have going on that? Probably 5?
I don't remember, but it was really well executed. I mean, Jorn knew what he was doing, and it was really well done. And I had a blast doing that. Worked with a lot of really great people.
Yeah, it's an interesting world.
That show was the beginning, really, of Vivica Fox's acting career. She and the late Christophe St. John were young lovers and whatever. And Christophe went on to work on Young and the Restless for decades. I had a Young and the Restless connection after Generations. So
yeah.
I still know people in the soap business world. It's a very.
Well, Dory was friends with a few people too, right?
My daughter was friends with Kelly Rutherford, who was on Melrose Place. Yeah. Yeah.
Shit. We'll put you on a soap. Here, sit. If you want to come and interrupt, you can sit.
It was fun. And I had a great time working on the soap.
I don't think he's gonna go away, so I'll make him sit. There we go. Yeah, he's a big suck, this one. I think he's photobombed every single one we've done so far. And the problem is he's so damn big that he doesn't really fit anywhere. Oh, there we go. I can see his face. I apologize for my dog. Okay, Tilk, you've got your... can you believe he's 130 pounds now?
Yeah. Yeah, you got your cameo, Silk.
All right, Tilk, go lie down. Go lie down. Go lie down. In your spot. In your spot. We've decided to consider this charming. Tilk, lie down.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, after a lot of the stuff, after Generations was when Robocop happened.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, we wanted to basically work off of the original Robocop movie. At the time, they did Robocop 2 and they did Robocop 3. And when the series was being developed, Robocop 3 had just come out. But the whole gig was basically to start from the entire vibe of the original Robocop movie, which was quite good at the time, and develop the series from that, which meant on a musical level that we had to do a big orchestral score. And unlike Raccoons, which had a lot of songs, it wasn't until much later in the Robocop episodes that there were any songs at all. And it was done orchestrally. We did the 2-hour pilot at Manta Recording, which doesn't exist anymore, with Gary Gray, 60-piece orchestra, 6 French horns. That's a beefy brass section. And it went quite well. And Kevin and I were nominated for a Gemini Award for Best Original Score for that pilot.
How did that come about? You did that whole thing in syndication, didn't you? It was pre-sold by Regal.
It was interesting. Yeah, what happened was there was a production company called Reicher, and they took care of the U.S. sale. and there was an international syndication company called Regal, and they pre-sold the series internationally. And what that accomplished was it helped get the financing. That plus Reicher helped the financing, and then it was produced by Skyvision, which was a part of Labatt Brewing.
Yeah, because Kevin was working with them at the time.
Kevin was, it was Kevin and Brian
That's
Ross,
right.
the producers. Yep. And Stephen Downing was the executive producer. Stephen Downing had been the showrunner on MacGyver, the original
MacGyver. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
So, there were some very good actors in it, mostly somewhat known people. I know Martin Milner from Adam 12 played Robocop's father. A lot of the actors were people that have worked quite a bit, but not necessarily leading type actors. But, there was good acting. It was well done. It was well produced. It was very dark. It was lit very dark. The music was very dark, but there were some very human, emotional music cues in it too. And Sally Gillis, Kevin's wife, wrote some of the stuff, especially sort of unusual cues, like if we had a theme for something, she might do that. And Sally and I wrote some stuff together, and she's also actually my classical duet piano partner. So it was interesting. And then, of course, everything had to be not only composed, but it had to be orchestrated, and it had to be copied, and had to be, you needed a librarian. It was a big job.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I mean, we had Glenn Morley helping. He was the producer in the booth. He was our contractor.
He ran Timbre Productions, I think, because he was doing a bunch of the tracks for Air Force. Later.
Right, and he was a great help in especially the organizational stuff.
Yeah, because you had Raccoons, you didn't have a copyist for Raccoons, or did you?
We did. It was Joe Turner was the copyist.
Joe Turner was the copyist?
I was actually, believe it or not, on Raccoons, I was orchestrating with score paper and pencil, sitting in hotel rooms with no keyboard or no musical instruments of any kind. So the fact that those orchestrations sound as good as they do, and they're really good.
You're sitting at the Westin Hotel in Ottawa doing this?
I was at the Delta Inn
Inn at the Provinces. Oh, jeez.
Yep.
I think it's still there. It's been a long time since I've been back to Ottawa. 3 years now.
I haven't been to Ottawa in more than 15 years. But yeah, so I was sitting in hotel rooms and I would write it all out. And, I knew enough about orchestrating to know what the combinations were going to be like, what the voicings were going to be like, and that kind of thing. And then we would bring it to the studio, and Joe Turner was in this room doing all the copying. Yeah. And it was pretty complicated, but we never had the organizational issues that we did doing Robo, because Robo was like a new episode every 9 days.
Yeah, and the episodes would have been longer.
Right, a lot of action cues, a lot of, and very complicated orchestrations. So I had a little bit of orchestration help. I just couldn't do it all.
Yeah, well, it's a huge amount of music. Again, quite a bit of underscore. It's been a while since I've seen the series. A
ton of underscore.
Well, the pilot was, that was what, Prime Directive, wasn't it? Wasn't that the pilot?
No, that was the future.
Oh, the future of law enforcement was the pilot. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it ran. Did it run about 2 hours? It's been such a long time. Like it was what, 94?
Well, 2 hours with all the commercials. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 90 minutes.
But I mean, Kevin and I were nominated for a Gemini Award for Best Original Score for that.
That's nothing to sniff at.
It was fun.
Yeah. That was a big deal.
It was a lot of work.
How was that? Like when you went to, where were they doing the Geminis that year? Were they doing it at the NAC, or were they doing it, because they used to always do it there?
No, it was in Toronto,
they did it at
but
Toronto?
I can't remember. Yeah.
I think there were a few times they did it at Massey Hall, but I can't remember. They try to change it up.
I don't remember it being Massey Hall, but I can't remember where it was.
They don't have the Gemini Awards anymore. They changed the name of them. Now they call them the Actor Awards or something. I don't know why they changed the name.
Well, you know, we had Actor Award nominations too.
Yeah, they amalgamated it all, so it's all. I don't think the statue looks as cool as the Gemini did. I always thought it was a beautiful design for a statue. This sort of.
I remember that Martin Short was involved in the telecast.
Martin
when we did
Short.
it, and he was so funny. He's pretty funny.
Yeah, he is. I don't know what he's doing now. Frankly, I don't really.
He was doing a tour with Steve Martin that was pretty good.
Oh, that would be great. Boy, talk about amazing musicians.
Yeah, I think it's on Netflix, actually. I think they did it for Netflix.
I'll have to look. Oh, that would have been pretty recent then.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah,
something like that.
Jeez. Speaking of Steve Martin, boy, there's a guy that can pick.
And you know what about Steve Martin? People think of him from Saturday Night Live and his stand-up and his banjo playing and whatever. He's also a very good writer, and he's also a very good actor in serious roles.
Yeah.
If you want to see a really good movie, if you haven't seen The Spanish Prisoner, and it is not about a prisoner from Spain, with David Mamet wrote it, genius, and really amazing.
I haven't seen it. When did it come out?
And you don't know whether Steve Martin, what?
I said, when did that come out? I've never seen it.
I don't know, 15 years
I
ago
gotta
or
hunt
so.
it down.
But I mean, the thing is, you don't know whether Steve Martin is a good guy or a bad guy until the very, very end.
Jeez, I don't know why I haven't seen it.
You just don't know. Yeah, it was a very good movie. If you have a chance to see it, you should.
I'll find a way to dig it up. It's interesting, all these things. You don't really, and some things they're hard to find. Now with the internet, you can find it all pretty easily.
You can find a lot of it. There's still stuff that you can't find. And, you know, we can't really cover, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've gotten involved with over the years in one session like this, obviously, because there's a whole lot of other stuff, people that I've worked with on tours, on records, and, you know, friends and things like that we haven't even touched on, that we can do another time.
Well, I'm going to call Jim Gilson in this week and see if we can get the whole three-way thing set up. Because
that would be
now
amazing,
I've got this pretty much set up. So
yeah, Jim and I have done a couple of virtual happy hours because we both enjoy a nice single malt scotch.
Myself included.
And he's delightful and very smart guy.
I like the single malt scotches. I like older ones. I don't mind 15 years. I prefer 21 or older.
Yeah, these days I'm actually drinking a Japanese whiskey.
What type? What kind?
It's Suntory whiskey.
I know that stuff. It's quite nice.
It's very, very nice. It's just the right. It's not really smoky, but it's not too light either. It's just right.
Yeah, the other thing too is, but you like sake, do you not? Because I think we had it at Katsura.
Occasionally, I had to kind of take a break from it.
Well, the way to have sake I actually like to have it hot. I like it served hot.
Yeah,
some people like it cold. I particularly like it hot.
No, it's got to be hot.
It makes a big difference.
And I have all the Japanese stuff here because I have a lot of Japanese stuff. There's an area at it's called Sawtelle Japantown. It's not far from here. It's about 15 minutes from here, and it's a plaza that has an amazing Japanese grocery store, an amazing Japanese dollar store, a restaurant that makes awesome nabiyaki udon, and a pretty good sushi bar.
Yeah, it'll be nice once the lockdown is up. I'll be able to come and see you in LA, be able to come back, because I got a whole bunch of episodes of this show I got to shoot.
You've got definitely. And you know what? You should take advantage of being here, which is very conducive to sports.
Yep.
to do some shoots here when you come.
That's the plan. I actually already have one lined up involving sailing. I don't know if I can say anything about it just yet. Probably pretty soon. Well,
that'd be great.
I know I told you, but I don't know if I can say it here yet. So.
Yeah, no, just
I'll keep it close to the vest. Yeah. But yeah. Well, what I'll do is like I said, I'll talk to Jim this week and see if we can get it set up and see if we can do another one. But yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to add, John, or should we wrap it up for this week?
Not right now. I think we've nailed it. It's more than an hour, and I mean I could go on forever, and I know you can too. You and I definitely are known to keep even when we're trying to wind down.
I don't think either of us know how to shut up. I think
and
that's
then
the
something
problem.
comes up, and then that's another 10 or 15 minutes.
Neither of us really know how to shut up. Well, what I'll do is I'll do a little outro. Well, it looks like we've got another unprofessional interruption. See, there's always one.
Are we having animals on screen again?
Apparently. Well, she keeps trying to jump up because she wants my attention. Like I said, I've just kind of given up with the idea because she always seems to want to. Yeah, this is what I get. Okay, Zero. Bye. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, John, and we'll do this again super soon. I'll call Jim this week.
Yeah, sounds great, Corey. And
this is great.
It's been a slice. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. I'll do a quick outro, and I'll talk to you in a sec. Okay. Bye. All right, so that pretty much winds things down for our first chat with John. I apologize. We do this at home, so like I said in the last podcast, this isn't something we typically do in a studio. It's supposed to be kind of a nice, fun chat. Just a quick plug, Go Nitro for our Canadian viewers will be premiering on the Game Plus network nationwide on Monday, March 29th at 6:30 p.m. And of course, if you go to gonitro.tv, you can see in your town across the United States where you can watch it. And I will talk to you soon.
My screen froze for a second.
Yeah, it has a tendency to do that. I'm still getting used to it. We've got a new...
So are we off?
We are off in...
All right.
5,
let's
4, 3... I'm just being an asshole. There we go.